Hello and welcome to KnightCast. My name is Jonathan Reyes, Senior Vice President for Communications and Strategic Partnerships, and I'll be your host from here at the St. John Paul II National Shrine in Washington, D.C. Here on KnightCast, we hope to help you step into the breach as men, as Catholics, and as knights. KnightCast is free and available to everyone, so you can find this episode and all episodes on demand anytime by visiting kfc.org/KnightCast. We're also excited to announce you can now find clips of KnightCast on Knights of Columbus social media channels, including YouTube, so it's easier to watch and share than ever. In this episode, we'll be talking to the Supreme Knight about his recent trip to Rome, discussing the Supreme Court Dobbs abortion case with Knights of Columbus Vice President of Public Policy Tim Saccoccia, taking a look at the work of the Archdiocese for Military Services USA, as well as giving you a look at a recent conversation I had in Rome with Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle. Thank you for joining us. I'm now joined by Supreme Knight Patrick Kelly to talk about his recent trip to Rome, including his first meeting with the Holy Father as Supreme Knight. Mr. Kelly, thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. It's great to be with you.
Well, you've had quite an adventure recently. You went to Rome, you met with the Holy Father. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I would say it was a great meeting with the Holy Father. It was my first as Supreme Knight, and I came away from the meeting with just a tremendous sense of, I would say, warmth and affection that the Holy Father has for the Knights of Columbus. It was so meaningful in so many ways. For me personally, it was just an honor to be there and to represent the Knights of Columbus, represent our 2 million men, represent the Knights of Columbus families in this meeting with the Holy Father. It was such an honor for me to be there on behalf of our brother Knights.
Just tell me what it's like. I mean, you're walking into the Holy Father's library and you're surrounded by people who are escorting you in. What's that feel like to just walk into that space?
It's a tremendous honor to do it. The meeting was about my first meeting as Supreme Knight, but it was also, I was accompanied with Carl Anderson so he could thank the Holy Father and then introduce me as his successor.
What did you say to the Holy Father?
Well, first I thanked him for all his support for the Knights of Columbus and all that we've worked on. I talked a lot about Saint Joseph, and as many of us know, I've dedicated my time as Supreme Knight to Saint Joseph. And I was really inspired to do that when I read Patris Corde, which is the Holy Father's letter about Saint Joseph. So we talked about Saint Joseph, and we talked about what Catholic men and families are facing. And we also talked about the charitable work of the Knights of Columbus and what we do both locally and internationally to build up the bonds of fraternity. I thanked him for the encyclical Fratelli Tutti and told him that we're doing our part to build up these bonds of brotherhood and fraternity at a time when there's so much fragmentation and so much confrontation in our society. So we talked about that, and we also talked about Blessed Michael McGivney, and I thanked him for approving the beatification of Father McGivney, and we talked about what the kind of priest Father McGivney was, that he was a priest in the mold of what Pope Francis would want, a priest concerned about his parishioners, concerned about the struggles that they are going through. So it was a very, very positive meeting, and I would just say I came away from it really fully understanding the warmth that the Holy Father has for the Knights of Columbus.
So there were a couple specific moments that you shared with me, at least, about the meeting with the Holy Father. Let me ask you about those. First is, you actually shared a first-class relic of Blessed Michael McGivney with him. How did that go?
Well, it was really beautiful. We gave the Holy Father a relic of Blessed Michael McGivney in a very nice reliquary. And he took it out of the box and reverenced the relic with a kiss. And I think it really shows his great admiration for Father McGivney and really for the story of Father McGivney, how Father McGivney served those at the time who were on the periphery. And those people on the periphery for Father McGivney were his parishioners, and it was the immigrant Catholic population who were struggling so much then. So I really think that the Pope has a fondness for Father McGivney, and as we know, he approved the beatification of Father McGivney too. So he's very aware of the cause of our founder.
That's quite an image to see the Holy Father reverencing a relic. It really moves me. But another image, we also presented the image of the St. Joseph icon as well, the traveling icon. Maybe you can comment on that.
Yeah, we did. So this is the traveling icon, as all of our Brother Knights know. This goes around the jurisdiction from council to council and parish to parish. And we have a prayer program with it. So we showed the Holy Father the image. We had an image there, and he blessed the image, and then he signed it. And then I described to him what the Pilgrim Icon program, how they travel from parish to parish, and he was very, very interested in it. I actually gave him a copy of the prayer manual that goes with the image. So it was a very, very moving thing. And of course, our inspiration for this, as I've said, is Patris Corde, is the Holy Father's letter on Saint Joseph. And that was the inspiration for, not only for me, as I've mentioned, consecrating my time to Saint Joseph, but also choosing an image of Saint Joseph as our pilgrim icon.
You did some more than just visit with the Holy Father while you were in Rome. You also had opportunities to do some service projects, and I was able to accompany you on some of those. I wonder if you might share about that.
Yeah, we did. So we had a couple of different projects, as you say. We worked with the Missionaries of Charity at two of their locations. One is a location that's very near the Vatican, where they help the homeless. And so we visited with the sisters there, and we actually went in and talked to some of the homeless men and women who are there. We also had a very, very important experience on the outskirts of Rome, where the Missionaries of Charity have a home. And in this home, they are serving about a dozen or so young children from Afghanistan who are profoundly disabled. And it's an interesting story. The Missionaries of Charity had a house in Kabul, in Afghanistan, where they served these profoundly disabled children. These are children who were abandoned by their parents in Afghanistan, left on the streets. And so the missionaries took them in and have cared for them, many of them since they were young infants. When Afghanistan fell to the Taliban, the missionaries knew they had to leave, and they were able to get out and come to the missionaries' house on the outskirts of Rome. And that's where we went to visit them one afternoon. And we brought wheelchairs from our wheelchair initiative. And the sisters really needed wheelchairs for these young children. So we visited them, gave them wheelchairs, and we spent some time being with the sisters and with these children. And I would say it was a very profound experience to be there. So many of these children are they're so disabled, and they have no one in the world except for the missionaries who care for them and who are raising them. And for us as Knights to be a part of that in a small way, to be there and to help them was so wonderful. And it really shows, I think, the breadth of the order of what we do. Yes, we do so many things on a local level, but here was a need that the Missionaries of Charity had, and we were able to serve them. So it was really very meaningful. And we pledged that we would continue to help them. So I think perhaps the next time we go back to Rome, we would also meet with the missionaries.
Well, let me switch gears a little bit before I let you go. Just a couple other things. Another big initiative that's coming forward is the Eucharistic revival that's being launched by the U.S. Catholic bishops. This is an effort over the course of a number of years to really focus on the Eucharist, belief in the Eucharist, honor, to bring people back to adoration in some cases, to deepen adoration in others. The Knights have really pledged to help with this. Tell me why this is so important.
You know, we all know that within the Catholic population, there is not a full understanding of the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. And we're very concerned about that as Knights. So that's why I think this initiative is so important. I also think that where we are as a society right now, we need Jesus Christ, and we need to center ourselves around Jesus Christ. And the way to do that is through the Eucharist. It is through Mass, it is through adoration. There's a unity there that we need. And if we bring our problems, we bring our gratitude, we bring everything to Jesus, He will build that up, and He will help us. So I just think it's something that the Knights can do. It's a national effort. We're a national organization, and we're very, very excited to help the U.S. bishops with this. I think there's so much good could come from this. I mean, we know that a devotion to the Eucharist at parishes turns a parish around. A personal devotion to the Eucharist turns our own personal lives around. So I think at a national level, for the Church in the United States, it's a really, really important initiative. And it's perfect for the Knights too, because we're in the parishes, we can get involved, we can help our pastors, we can have Eucharistic processions, we can lead those processions. So in many ways, it's tailor-made for who we are.
And we're in the middle of producing a video about this and some other ways to promote it, but more news to come as we develop how we're going to cooperate on that. So from the transcendent to the slightly more earthly, another big event right now that we'd like to get your thoughts on, Mr. Kelly, is this recent conversation around what's called the Dobbs case. This is an important moment for the pro-life movement. Some call it the most important moment since 1973, maybe, maybe not. This is a moment when we might see the pro-life cause advance dramatically. There's no guarantees, but we might. As someone who's been in the movement forever yourself, but also as leader of the Knights, we've been there forever. I wonder if you have any thoughts for us about this current moment in the pro-life movement, the Dobbs case. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, it is a crucial moment. And either way the case goes, it will be very, very important for the future of the pro-life movement. You know, the Knights have been involved with this movement since the very beginning. I mean, the first March for Life that Nellie Gray organized, the Knights of Columbus were around her kitchen table in 1974, organizing that March for Life. And then we have a long history. So it's a crucial time for us. It's a crucial time, I think, to come together to express our love and support for unborn children, but also for those women who are in difficult pregnancies. We do a lot. We do a lot with pregnancy centers. And I think the Knights of Columbus, more and more, will have to get involved with helping those mothers who are in desperate need of help with bringing their children to term. And so it's a crucial time for the pro-life movement. I think Dobbs is an extremely important case. But just to clarify about Dobbs, abortion will not go away if Roe is overturned. Abortion will then go back to the states, and it'll be a patchwork of states where abortion will be legal. And I think that's where the Knights of Columbus can really make a difference on a state and a local level.
Yeah, one of the things I love about being a Knight is precisely that we're committed to the care of the child, we're committed to the care to the woman as she's carrying the child, and we're committed to the care of the woman and the child after birth. And I just think that's the testimony we need right now in the pro-life movement, and it's an honor to be a part of a movement that's committed to that. So.
That's right, because as Knights, we believe that every life matters. You know, every life has dignity, every life matters. And so we're committed to that.
Mr. Kelly, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate it.
Each month, our Supreme Chaplain, Archbishop Laurie, presents a reflection and challenge for Knights to live during that month. The Supreme Chaplain's monthly challenge is a great way for Knights to put perseverance into practice and grow in faith and fraternity. Here's Archbishop Laurie to issue his monthly challenge.
My brother Knights and my friends, From my Supreme Chaplain's monthly challenge for January, the scripture passage comes from the Gospel reading for the Mass on Sunday, January 2nd. And behold, the star that they had seen at its rising preceded them until it came and stopped over the place where the child was. They were overjoyed at seeing the star, and on entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother. They prostrated themselves and did him homage. In so many ways, Jesus was not what was expected. He came to us not as a powerful earthly king or a military leader, but as a helpless child of a poor family. Even so, the pagan magi recognized the child as a newborn king. The true dignity of all human beings can at times be difficult for us to see and recognize, but like the magi, we may look past appearances and see the true worth of every human person and rejoice in the gift of life. This month, I challenge you to offer 1 decade of the Rosary each day, individually or as a family, for the intention of life. Second, I challenge you to participate with your brother knights in the Novena for Life, March for Life, and/or Pregnancy Center Support Faith in Action programs. As you undertake this monthly challenge, I ask you to reflect. How can you live your life in such a way as to inspire a change of hearts and minds to a pro-life position? What concrete actions can you take to build a culture of life, such as supporting pregnancy resource centers? How can you better incorporate praying for life into your own life of prayer? God bless you as you undertake this monthly challenge. Vivat Jesus.
With the abortion case Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization currently before the Supreme Court, many believe we may be approaching one of the most important moments in the history of the pro-life movement in the United States. There's no question this case could have significant implications for the cause of life, so we wanted to take a closer look at its importance and possible consequences. To help us do that, we're now joined by Tim Saccoccia, Knights of Columbus Vice President of Public Policy. Tim, thanks for being here.
Well, thanks, Jonathan. I'm happy to be here with you.
Let's turn to the issue at hand, which is the state of the pro-life situation, this new case called Dobbs. You know, in these very fraught moments, you get a lot of misinformation or just a lot of partial information. So maybe what would be helpful is if we just gave a very 30,000-foot sort of account of sort of where we are and what could happen. So let me start with the where we are question. What is right now in the United States the law of the land on abortion? And how has it been determined?
Well, I think when we look at the current state of abortion law and abortion jurisprudence in the United States, a couple of different things come up. First is, I think what everyone knows, there's 2 really controlling cases that affect abortion law in the United States. And that's, of course, Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey. And they were decided about 20 years apart. Roe is, of course, the decision we all rally around that we hear so much about. What the justices said in Roe is that there is a constitutional right to abortion that exists within the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. And from that right that is not in the Constitution, they developed a new right, codified it into law, and went on to say that what we're going to, because of this, there was going to be the 3 trimesters are going to be kind of points where different law will be allowed. But what Casey also did is it changed part of Roe. And it said instead of this trimester system, what we're going to have instead is we're going to look at the age of viability, which scholars generally put at 24 weeks, although medicine and science have actually made that much younger. Children, of course, as we know, are being born earlier and surviving and thriving, which is fantastic. But for the legal purposes, it's about 24 weeks. And so before that, after 24 weeks, the court said states can continue to regulate as they did under Roe. But before 24 weeks, what we want to do is know is if there is a law, like we're looking at in this Pennsylvania law in that case, is it an undue burden on a woman's ability to exercise her right to have an abortion? And that standard is what has been governing since the early 90s on abortion jurisprudence in this country.
So let's turn to that then. So the Dobbs case itself, what is it purporting to do in relationship to Roe and Casey? What is, in the simplest terms, what's going to change, or how could this play out? Yeah.
Sure. So the case the Supreme Court just heard oral arguments in early December is Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. And so this is based on a law, the Gestational Age Act out of Mississippi, that bans abortion after 15 weeks. So there's before, again, as we were talking about, Jonathan, that 24-week line that the Supreme Court had set. So that's really right there is where I think it hits the intersection with Roe and Casey the most. In fact, when the Supreme Court granted what's called cert, or the writ of certiorari, in the case, they said that we will consider one question, and that is the question of, are all pre-viability abortion bans unconstitutional? So really, this goes right to the heart of Casey, supported by Roe. And so the court's going to have to answer that question. They could answer more questions. They could consider other items, but we suspect we will get at least an answer from that question. And if that question is no, that not all pre-viability abortion bans are unconstitutional, that opens up opportunities for pro-life laws like Mississippi's, like laws that exist in Missouri and in many other states that would address questions of when unborn child feels pain, when different other such limits as well that recognize the dignity of the unborn child. So, I think we don't know what the court will say. I think, there are probably three different areas it could fall into, which means it'll probably end up falling into a fourth. But I think one area is the court could come back and say, the status quo. We're going to maintain things where they are. We took this case because we wanted to be clear about the value of precedent, and we don't think that overturning this case that value has been met. That would not be the most pro-life decision for us, for those seeking more pro-life laws. I think the second is somewhere in the middle, more of a middle ground. Do they come up with a new test, or do they better clarify what an undue burden means? That would give states the opportunity to say, well, there are some laws that we think are important, some pro-life laws, some laws that will support maternal health that we want to pass and may pass muster with the court. And then, of course, the third bucket is the one I think we hear a lot more about. And that's this idea of overturning Roe or Casey or gutting Roe or Casey, as some have said. And really what that would mean is to say this, to your point, Jonathan, this viability standard doesn't work. We're going to throw it out. States have a right to go in and to regulate the medical profession. That's a long-held position of the court and of jurisprudence. Abortion is a medical procedure, and the states have a right to go in and regulate on it. That this super right that exists somewhere in the 14th Amendment is not sacrosanct. It's not there. But what that doesn't mean is that the day after the Dobbs decision, that abortion would be legal throughout the land or illegal throughout the land or something like that. What it would mean is each state would then have to consider what they're going to do, most likely. And so states that have very permissive abortion laws would continue to stand. States that have more pro-life laws or laws on the books that were never allowed to take effect because of Dobbs, because of Roe, because of Casey, those might be able to go into effect or to start that process. So it is not it would be a big moment, but it would also be a big moment to consider that there's more work to do. There's more work to do in states that have not recognized the dignity of an unborn child and the culture of life. And there's also work to do to accompany women and their children as Knights have done for decades, and that we should do as a community as well.
So if I understand you right, Tim, we're taking what has the Supreme Court has codified and said possible one decision, and just basically said, we can't quite codify this. Let's give it back to the states and let them make it more of it's a legislative process, not a court process, to determine some of these lines. And if that's true,
that's exactly right.
Okay, so if that's true, then what we would probably see, if in your third scenario, if it's given back to the states, so to speak, we're going to see a lot more just statewide conversations about abortion in general. So we could expect a lot more conversation about this at the local level and a lot more debate about life and the raising of human dignity. Is this a good thing?
Yeah, I think we will hear a lot more about it. I think and the other thing we have to consider too is states that may have had okay laws, but maybe they want to move in a more pro-life direction, those laws could be challenged in the courts as well. But I think those will be moments of conversation and moments of discussion. Should they become law, they may be automatic. There may be lawsuits right away. What would happen then is as those lawsuits move through the courts, we would actually have a discussion about what's happening. What are the procedures we're talking about? In the early 2000s and the late 90s, the partial birth abortion ban movement created an entire pro-life generation, because people at my age were learning what is abortion and what's happening, and they were hearing about what this was really about, and it turned a lot of hearts and minds in a pro-life direction. I think that could be another moment for this as these stories come out, that we hear more from women who have chosen life, who the different procedures. Also, because of the different legal regimes that exist, sometimes we don't even have good reporting numbers in different states on what's happening. So these are all things that could happen. The doors would be open to hearing more about this, to having conversations with our neighbors and our councils, with our brother knights and our families, but also as a nation as well. So I think that's another kind of other part of a possible outcome of it coming back to the States.
Okay, so we've got 3 ways this could go, and maybe a 4th that we can't imagine yet. But why not till June? So tell me, so they hear it. Just explain a little bit about the way the Supreme Court works for our viewers.
So the court heard oral arguments on December 1st. That's really certainly one of the more public parts of the process, but it's really falls somewhere probably in the middle. For many months before this, the attorneys that argued the case had been submitting briefs. So usually when a case is this complicated and it's certainly not going to be a unanimous decision, it takes a little bit longer to get it all put together. And so what we say is we typically expect a case like this to take those several months and to come out closer to the end of the Supreme Court's term, which is in June. The date's a bit fluid, but probably in late June. So when they announce when they are releasing opinions, and on those days, especially in June, millions of Americans are going to be glued to their computer screens and television screens to see, is this the day that we're going to hear what happens? And when it does, we'll certainly have that information for brother knights as well.
Great. So waiting around is not an option for knights who've been at this forever. What should knights be doing now, even as this decision is being written? Tell us some of the things that we should be doubling down on and part of our history. You've said before this is a rich part of our history. Maybe you can just comment on that for us.
Well, I think while we're awaiting the decisions, one very important thing we can do, since writing the decisions is so important, is pray. Pray, and then once you're done, pray again for wisdom and for clarity for the justices, to recognize the dignity of the unborn child. On a more day-to-day, maybe more physically practical element as well. As knights, like I said, we have a long history of supporting women and their children and families. Our order was founded to support widows and orphans and widows and their children. And that's something that we need to continue to do. Women who have chosen life, who've made the difficult decision to carry their child to term, maybe in a difficult pregnancy, maybe they're poor or struggling. We need to be there to help them. And so our supportive pregnancy care centers has perhaps never been more important than it is now. And I know, having been a state deputy and a Grand Knight, that our councils are there. They're working with pregnancy centers. The councils that are, ask for another project and do that. For councils that aren't already working with pregnancy care centers, find one in your community and step up and volunteer. That's what we need to be doing now, because when we talk about promoting a culture of life, when we talk about being pro-life, we have to be there to help the mothers who have chosen life.
I imagine over the next 6 months, there's going to be a lot of chatter about this. And as chatter is in the modern world, it can be very confusing, and it's coming from different sides in that. So what are we doing as the Knights? And I know you're up to something. I just want you to share about it in order to keep the brothers informed, in order to help them inform others. And what resources are we producing?
Sure. Well, I think what you're referring to, Jonathan, of course, is our new Faithful Citizenship Program, which brother Knights can go online and sign up for. And what this is it's an opportunity to learn a little bit more about what's happening in Washington, what's happening, in this particular time, right, of course, in the courts as well. This is something brother Knights have asked for. We know they're interested in. We know that it's something that can be helpful, because there is a lot of noise out there, on all sides of the aisle, in all areas of the spectrum. And what we want to do is provide some no-nonsense, straightforward information. And why is that? Because I can't, anywhere I go, even when people don't know what I do for a living, there's a question of, what do you think about this in the news or this issue? And the more we can help our brother knights have the information at the water cooler, at the dinner table, at the back of Mass, to have that type of knowledge is, I think, an important thing that we can do. So especially as we're coming on the Dobbs decision as well, we'll talk about that. We already have a little bit in our first couple of newsletters. We'll talk about Roe, we'll talk about Casey, so that information is there. And then, there are also these moments where we do activate our whole membership. Earlier in the summer of this past year, we asked all members to write in about the Hyde Amendment, the federal requirement that tax dollars not be used to fund abortion, because it's in danger. But there are other moments that come along, not that they're less important or more important, but maybe we don't go to all brother knights. But those who have signed up for our newsletter, they might see those opportunities and have an opportunity and have a chance to echo, their concerns, to share their concerns with elected officials, especially when our bishops have asked through the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops or our state Catholic conferences as well, which are two important resources that all brother knights should sign up for to get this information as well if they want to know how to be faithful citizens and active Catholic, constituents.
Well, that's going to be really important for us, Tim. I mean, fundamentally, as an organization, as a brotherhood, we're committed to compassionate care, and we're always going to lead with that care. But what you're doing is so important in our country. What you're doing for the Knights and what the Knights are being in this space means a great deal. So thanks for your service. Maybe we can have you back again in a couple of months, check in on how things are going and sort of get an update from you.
Sure, I'd love to do it. Thanks so much.
You bet. Thanks for being with us, Tim, and thanks for your good work. Partnering with the Archdiocese for the Military Services USA, the Armed with the Faith prayer book was developed by the Knights of Columbus for use by members of the U.S. military around the world. The Order recently delivered copies of the newest edition of this important spiritual resource for members of the armed forces, and we wanted to give you a look.
The Knights of Columbus are providing this prayer book called Armed with the Faith, and that are currently distributed for our military service members throughout the world. So this is a great gift that the Knights of Columbus are providing not only for our military chaplains, but also for our service members.
Today we're unloading over 10,000, the Armed with the Faith prayer book from the Knights of Columbus Supreme Council. We've worked here today to box them up, ship them out around the world to military bases and overseas command posts, because the Knights of Columbus is about supporting our active men and women military. It actually started here in the District of Columbia and has grown into this program where we distribute this prayer book to active duty military around the world, as well as to veterans here in the United States.
When the first edition came out, we assembled a committee of advisors to make suggestions for prayers that could go in, and we wanted things that were well known for Catholics and also themed for the military.
Plus, these Armed with the Faith booklets, that as our service members and families use them, they will be drawn closer to the risen Lord Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns forever and ever. Amen.
While I was deployed, the prayer books were actually everywhere. You would go to your local chaplain, normally a priest, and they would have these materials, and the prayer books were already available.
The book was designed to fit in the pocket of the combat uniforms. It's virtually indestructible.
One of our pillars is patriotism, and in that, of course, is supporting our troops in any way we can. So by coming here today, we really just build that community that we always try and build with the Knights and support our troops in the process.
We're now at 700,000 prayer books that have been produced. 600,000 are already distributed. It is a way for us to augment our Catholic chaplains, provide them with the means to use the prayer book as a means to reach out. Many of our Catholic chaplains have come back and said this is the finest piece of evangelization that we have.
I'm now joined by Archbishop Timothy Broglio of the Archdiocese for Military Services USA. Your Excellency, thank you for being with us.
Pleasure to be with you and to talk about the Knights of Columbus and the good work they do with the military.
So let me just start with this. Maybe just tell us a little bit about how a priest from the Cleveland Diocese becomes the Archbishop for the Archdiocese of Military Services.
Well, it's a long story, and And actually, first I spent 25 years as a Vatican diplomat. And I think it's from there I was the nuncio in the Dominican Republic and the apostolic delegate in Puerto Rico. And I think it's at that point that the Congregation for Bishops was looking for a replacement for now Cardinal Edwin O'Brien, who was moved to Baltimore. And I think that's when they began to think outside of the box. And they said, well, we've got this, we have this American who's just a little bit farther down south. Maybe we can move him up north. So when the question was put to me, it was still in the form of a possibility. So it was a very friendly sort of discourse, and I was happy to accept, even though I really didn't know what I was getting into. But that's often the case in the church.
So tell us a little bit, our viewers, a little bit about what the Archdiocese for Military Services USA is, its scope, its reach, the mission.
The Archdiocese is charged with the pastoral care of men and women in the 6 branches of the armed services, their families, students at the 5 military academies, patients and staff of the 153 veterans hospitals throughout the United States, then in Puerto Rico and in Guam as well. And then any Catholic, any American Catholic who works for the US federal government outside of the boundaries of the United States. So roughly we calculate that we serve 1.8 million Catholics throughout the world. It is a personal archdiocese. So unlike, for example, the Archdiocese of Washington, where you're a member if you are a Catholic and live in that archdiocese, for my archdiocese or the archdiocese entrusted to my pastoral care, it depends on who you are rather than where you live. Now, there is a geographic element as well, though. If you happen to live on a military installation and choose to be a member of the archdiocese, you can do that as well.
So this means you're basically in a plane all the time to serve such a diocese.
That's correct. Normally, pre-pandemic, I spent about 200 days a year on the road.
Wow. Well, now you've settled a little bit, and now you can do an interview. So
Exactly.
Let me ask you about this prayer book that the Knights designed, which we just recently distributed again. Tell me about why this is so important for our military men and women who are serving.
It's very important for a number of reasons. I have a copy of it here. This is the 6th edition. Several 100,000 copies have been distributed, and it has a number of prayers, resources, and examination of conscience. But it's very useful because it fits in one of the pockets of the uniform of all of the branches. So it's handy. It's also extremely durable. It's very difficult to break this. And the pages turn without making any noise. So that even if you're going to read the run of the prayers at night and you might be in a tent with a number of other people, or if you're on the front lines, you're not going to create any noise with this prayer book. So it's very much appreciated. We try to hand it out, particularly in places at the end of boot camps and in those sort of instances. And then, of course, all the chaplains have the possibility of obtaining a supply of the prayer books, so that they can have them on hand when they're requested.
Are the prayers specific to the military in any way? Are they chosen in that way?
Well, some of them are specific to the military, but some of them are just general prayers that every Catholic would like to have. So we have, for instance, here we have a prayer for one's family. We have a prayer in time of isolation, prayer for those we love, prayer for civil authorities, a nighttime prayer. So there's a tremendous variety here. And then there are also, obviously, there's a prayer for the canonization of Father McGivney.
Very important indeed, yes.
Indeed.
Have you encountered people who've used it or commented on it, any of your trips, or any stories of men or women who benefited from it?
I have, and I've also had soldiers, well, not necessarily soldiers, but military men and women pull them out of their uniform, usually the pants pocket, because that's the larger one, and show me that this has been with them in Afghanistan, or this has been with me in Iraq. So it's I've heard number of, and it's probably the most popular item that we distribute.
Tell me this, what is it like to just ask a more general question, what is it like to be a Catholic in the military? What do you encounter? So we provide this prayer book, but what's that experience like for the men and women you encounter?
Well, it's an experience, there's a combination of things, because particularly if someone's in a foreign country serving, obviously the chaplaincy and the base community is very, very important, because it's probably the only place where you can receive the sacraments, where you can receive the comfort of your faith. But also, obviously, in many places of isolation, and particularly in these long years of war that we've experienced as a country, it's also a time when people begin to ask fundamental questions. So the RCIA, for example, is probably the largest program that we have in the Archdiocese. Also, many people who might have slipped through the cracks are now getting confirmed, because they're in that situation where perhaps they've even seen death, and they begin to ask those fundamental questions about themselves. And that's why it's very important, obviously, to have a priest there who can answer those questions and who can walk with them and accompany them in these most important moments of their life journey.
Do you find that the experience in the military, allows for these men and women to bring something to their faith specifically? Is there something about being in the military that affects the way they live out their Catholic faith?
I think it does. I think the level of commitment is very strong. I think that would be one element. I think also a certain notion of trying to do what is right, and not that that's absent in other communities, but I think I see that very pronounced in military communities. If they practice their faith, they practice it very fervently.
Archbishop Bergoglio, thank you again for being with us. Thanks for everything you do for our servicemen and servicewomen around the country, and for taking the time to be with us today.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Archbishop. On a recent trip to Rome, I had the opportunity to sit down with Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, prefect for the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples and the former Archbishop of Manila in the Philippines. It was an honor to speak with Cardinal Tagle, and we're glad to be able to share part of that conversation here on KnightCast.
My father was a member of the Knights of Columbus. So I grew up seeing my father going to the parish, to attend this meeting of a group of men called the Knights of Columbus. And I remember when he became like a fourth-degree knight, he came home with this white tuxedo and this hat and sword, and we were, wow, what's happening here? So the images were there. But I knew that the Knights of Columbus is church-based, parish-based, so it is not just any club, not just any gathering, and they were very active in church. And the spirit of fraternity in our world where there's so much suffering, human-caused disasters and natural disasters, and again, the woundedness and division, etc. I see how Caritas, as the arm, the social and caritative arm of the church, really does evangelization and helps in the healing of wounds. I remember visiting a place where there was not a single Christian. And they staged a program of Thanksgiving for Caritas. And the head of that village said, you Christians, you're different from us. Very, very different. But why do you think of us? Why do you come here? Why? And he asked that question, with I should say curiosity, but it's more than curiosity. I think he was like magnetized by the mystery of this very concrete acts of love. And I myself felt that he was opening the door for me to proclaim the gospel. So I said, our Lord and Master, Jesus, taught us to love everyone. To love everyone. And he said, privately, I want to get to know your Master. So, through concrete acts of charity, if we Christians do it clearly as an expression of love of God, that will somehow be felt and sensed by others. And it's a point of healing. Peoples of different religions, they somehow get attracted to the message of love. I noticed that these past years, the messages of the Holy Father on World Mission Sunday is a reminder that all of us are called to be evangelizers. And we are told to go back to the experience of the first apostles. Like for this Sunday, we were brought back to Saint Peter being forbidden by the Sanhedrin from proclaiming Jesus after the cure of the paralytic, the crippled man. And Saint Peter just said, but how can we not speak of what we have seen and heard? And so the invitation for all of us is, before looking at strategies, to look at ourselves. I mean, just like the apostles, they lacked the educational, cultural preparation. But what they had was a gripping experience of the Son of God. And they were the first ones to have been changed by their encounter with Jesus. And they started believing that life could be changed, if you have Jesus in your life. And that experience, they could not keep to themselves, It is the wellspring of what we call missionary zeal. So I think the first invitation for all of us is to go back to that root, that experience of Jesus. Is Jesus real to me? How is my relationship with the Lord? And with that, then you go out. And just like the early church, and in the history of the church, part of that zeal is also trying to understand the contexts of the people to whom, the societies to whom we present Jesus. So you have a Saint Paul who dealt with the Athenians. You have a Saint Augustine who dealt with the Manichaeans. You have Saint Thomas Aquinas, the use of Aristotle. So we have a whole tradition of very committed evangelizers, but then also men and women of their times, understanding the context, understanding the thirst, of their generation, but at the same time understanding the mentalities and what language to use, what methods to use, and what are they looking for. Like for example, right now with the young people so adept in social communications, I think the church is being asked to be present there, in an evangelical way. And for me, not just to use the means of social communications, but to realize that the social communications is a world in itself that needs to be evangelized because it has its own values. It has its own methodologies and priorities. So how could we bring to that world, the values of the gospel, etc.?
A special thanks to His Eminence for taking the time to speak with me in Rome, and we're very happy to have shared part of that interview here on KnightCast. KnightCast is filmed at the St. John Paul II National Shrine, and so we want to take the opportunity to share with you a little about this incredible place of prayer and pilgrimage. Last episode, we showed a part of my tour of the shrine with past Supreme Knight Carl Anderson, whose vision for the shrine made it possible. Today, we're going to share a second part of that unique tour. Let's take a look. This space is also totally Catholic space. Its imagery is so clear. Some people who come here aren't Christian, but John Paul II actually, as you were saying, had an ability to reach the whole world. He reached young people who didn't know that they had time for Christ. He reached people in cultures who weren't sure that Christianity was a good thing for them. He was beloved by the world. This space seems to me to be a welcome to anyone. You don't have to be Catholic or Christian to come here.
John Paul II's ministry, Jesus Christ, has united himself in some way with every person. He's meant for everyone. And his incarnation, his suffering, is in a way uniting with every individual. And he does that in the depth of the person's conscience. That's why conscience, religious liberty, was so important to John Paul II. And in meditation, in contemplation, that's where your conscience is able to come in contact with that reaching out of the Lord, if we could put it that way. And at the same time, artistic beauty will save the world. That very clearly, John Paul II. And that's what this chapel, this church, are about. So it welcomes everyone, and it offers what Christianity has to offer, which is the person of Jesus Christ as understood and lived with the community.
Right, and not just taught in a didactic way, but experienced. You experience a person. This is John Paul II, open wide your hearts to him. I like the line about confidence, because just open your hearts to him, he will make himself known. And this is a space where you can have that happen.
And I think this was the great power of World Youth Days, because his expression of that with young adults, young Catholics, time after time, year after year, revealed that in his way of life, his own person. And I think as he came to the end of his life, very ill, suffering a great deal, people saw that. It wasn't just talking points, okay? It was something that was being lived and suffered with an authenticity.
This whole shrine is a renovation of the cultural center. Tell me about this space in particular. What was here, and what did it take to make it into what it is now?
The idea of the cultural center, which was Cardinal Maida's great idea in the 90s, to make something that was like a presidential library, something like the Smithsonian Institution for conferences, made possible the next step, which was to move from a cultural center to a shrine. But the idea of a cultural center was so tremendously important and insightful because culture, again, was a key theme of John Paul II, because culture was, for him, the expression of the community's idea and living out of their own personal identity. And so the idea of a cultural center that would be a place where Catholic values, Catholic history, Catholic culture could be expressed in freedom and with respect for other cultures was really very much a part of John Paul II, who he was. It became iconic for John Paul II to kneel down when he came to a new country to visit, come down from the airplane and kneel down and kiss the ground. Maybe now it looks sort of ordinary, but put yourself in the context of a country that much of its history has been subject to a colonial power, has for much of its recent history been treated as a second-class citizen. And then maybe the most important leader from that continent comes to your country, and the first thing he does is kneel down, kiss the ground, because your country is valuable. Your country is important. Your culture is important. Your heritage is important. Dramatic impact. And that's why some of the most precious relics we have at the shrine are gifts to the Pope from many of those travels.
Thank you to Mr. Anderson for sharing his unique insight into the St. John Paul II National Shrine. To learn more about the shrine, you can visit jp2shrine.org, and we look forward to showing you some additional parts of my tour with Mr. Anderson in future episodes. Thank you for joining us for this episode of KnightCast. Once again, you can find this episode and all episodes on demand at kfc.org/KnightCast. And you can also find clips of KnightCast on Knights of Columbus social media channels. So please share KnightCast with brother knights and others and encourage them to check it out. Also, if you have thoughts, suggestions, or comments on KnightCast, we'd love to hear them. Just send an email to knightcast@kfc.org. On the next KnightCast, we'll be talking about the National Eucharistic Revival Initiative of the U.S. Bishops, as well as taking an in-depth look at the fast-approaching March for Life. We hope you can join us. Vivat Jesu.